Right, good evening, everyone. Sorry about that. Those streams seem to have to think about it a little bit before going up. Hello. New year, 2019. Exciting times. And exciting year, as I was saying in my review of 2018 with WoW. They tend to alternate because the expansions run on roughly 2-year cycles. We always seem to get a year where the last expansion is sort of done and we have the lead into the next expansion that comes out. That was last year. So that means this year is a year of solid content, BFA solid content. Whether it ends up rescuing the situation, we shall have to wait and see. But yes, Happy New Year, everyone. If you're new, by the way, hello. We just basically discuss whatever you wish to discuss that's Warcraft related. And if not, at least closely Warcraft related. So, how have I been? I'm much better now. Obviously, I've had the surgery. I was only able to stream a couple of days last week because it wasn't all that comfortable after a few years sitting down for so long. There's a couple of wounds that are not really healing, although they actually feel a bit better now. I'm going to get them checked out again on Friday, but I'm now much more comfortable. So it's fine. I'm still not allowed to pick anything up. I'll not be allowed to do that until I've had the okay by the surgeon, who I will not see until late February. But yes, I've been fine. Thank you very much. How are we all? And so what are we looking forward to 2019? Not the zone full of gnomes, I'm assuming. I'm quite looking forward to a proper old god story starting off. I'm not enamoured. Any mince pie? No. I'm on the pure. Well, I'm not even on the puree diet yet. I'm still on the liquid diet. It was very, very difficult to get it all in last week. Now it's much easier. Heck. I start the puree phase of the diet this Friday. And then, it goes through various subjects. What are the subjects today? For whatever will you wish to discuss? It can be what we're hoping for from 2019. I think we're going to need to temper our expectations, like I've just been sort of discussing in the past few weeks, really. I accept now. I think I accept that Blizzard has fundamentally changed in terms of the way it does things. I think that's what we have to accept now. That doesn't necessarily mean that Warcraft is doomed, just that we have to accept that they're going to keep us at arm's length. They're not going to be very good with feedback. They're not going to be very good with engagement. But that doesn't mean they fired the CFO. They didn't. Well, they did and they didn't. I mean, from what I could understand, they were going to leave. They were leaving anyway. But I don't know. It's not. It's not one of those stories like corporate ins and outs. If they're not directly related to game development, it's not as interesting to me. But you're looking forward to making a Kultran Zandalari druid. Yeah, see, I'm not. The Zandalari druid would appeal to a certain extent. It would absolutely appeal. But for the fact raptors give me motion sickness, and given that its travel form is a raptor, that's no good for me. So that's a bit of a shame. I discovered that a few years ago when I first made a Horde character. But hi everyone, Happy New Year to you too. You bet Netflix simply said here's a lot of money. Quite possibly, yeah. So yes, so no, mince pies would be right off, going back to the earlier one. I mean, next year, I guess I would be okay to have those. I don't seem to be not tolerating anything, but I haven't tried any bad. Well, I'm obviously not going to at the moment because I'm on this different diets. People tell me that when they've gone through this, they do inevitably try out a few bad things, and it's perfectly possible I'll tolerate all of it. So I need to put off that day as long as possible. Just use a normal mouse instead of. I am not. That doesn't work indoors anyway, does it? What about when you're indoors wanting to move around? In a dungeon or something like that. Not that I'm playing any. I haven't even leveled up any other character. my Paladin is the only character I've got at 120. It's like there has been no other expansion where I've only leveled up one character to level cap. Obviously, there's a long time to go for BFA. I don't think that'll stay. But at the moment, I don't really feel like it. Don't feel like it at all. Yeah, but the cat form for Zandalari is druid form. It is raptor form, isn't it? Oh, I can use the glyph of the... I suppose, yeah, glyph of the cheetah. I guess that would work. But that would be a bit... Because it's all supposed to be a bit very Zandalari. Would a cheetah really fit? I mean, it would solve that problem, I'll grant you. Island expeditions are still lame. The whole concept of them is curiosity, isn't it? The sort of thing, you know, you go along to see, you think, yeah, that's all right, that's fine. But then you don't really want to do too much of it. I think that's the problem with it. I've said this before. My perception of islands, obviously I don't know this. This is just what I see of them. I reckon the thing with islands is it was driven by technology. Some developers said, look, we can do this thing, right? This will be really cool. And we may be able to, when we develop it, do some extra cool stuff with it. But we need a vehicle to launch it. And I think islands, they came up with islands as being like the vehicle to launch it. But I mean, when I tested them a bit, they were all right. When you do it with people you know, I can imagine it being okay. After that, it's just a chore. It's really just a chore. And I don't do them at all because I don't have anyone to do them with and I ain't pugging. I might, maybe I should just try just for the hell of it again, but I didn't like it last time. The Warfronts are much improved with the currency and rare quests, the capture zones. But again, I mean, Warfronts themselves, I mean, I hope they do get better or continue to get better. I think they have. I think you're right. And I hope they continue to get more interesting. But again, the whole concept of Warfronts to me is not that interesting. It would have been a better concept, surely. Or would it? I don't know, because people keep saying maybe it would have been better if it was done as a PvP thing. But then it would have been very much like old style Alterac Valley, wouldn't it? And after a while, people used to just circumvent all the resource gathering and just go for the Zerg across. You know, would there be an element... I suppose if there's a forced element of gathering for the siege engines and stuff, that might make it more interesting. Yeah, so as a PvP thing, Warfronts I think could have worked. I just don't see it working as it is. You think islands are what you make of them? A lotto for some nice selling and look, Transmog's met some paps. Well, yeah, but that's the thing. That's the reward you get from it. It's a classic piece of content where you'll do it and you'll be fine doing it if the rewards you're getting from it are something that interests you. But the content, what I would argue is the content itself is not that interesting. You know, and I know it's a holy grail. I know I can't expect a game only to have content that's interesting for the sake of doing the content. But in WoW, it's quite limited. You know, raiding is always good enough to do without any particular rewards. Mythic Plus dungeons are a good piece of content to do. And some, I mean, that's obviously my opinion. Some other people may like other aspects of the game, battlegrounds, arenas, things like that as well. But I don't really see islands as, if there were no rewards for it, how many people would do it? That's what I would say. If there were no rewards, or how many people would do it, and I really don't think people would at all, like at all. You can't bring yourself to do islands even with all the extra incentives. I mean, but that's sort of my point really. Are the rewards an incentive to do it? If they are, you'll do it. If they're only just, you'll do it begrudgingly. If they're something you're really excited about, you'll be happy to do it. Especially if you can do it with... I mean, it becomes more fun with people you know. If you're doing it with people you know and have a bit of a laugh, yeah. But other than that, no. You can't do Warfronts as PvP. You can do islands as PvP. You hate PvP with intensity. I do. Well, I do in WoW. I don't in some other games. Elder Scrolls Online, I think it's fantastic. I might even try. There's supposed to be a new Dark Age of Camelot game coming out. Now, I never played Dark Age of Camelot, But I played Warhammer online and got into a guild of people who did play Dark Age of Camelot, and they said it was very good. So I may give it a go. Who knows? Your prediction. Heroic Warfronts will have squads, groups of the intelligent island NPCs to make them more raid-like and interesting. It is possible. Yeah, like I say, I do not believe that islands are... I don't think they came up with the idea of islands and then worked on the smart NPCs. I think they had the smart NPCs and then wanted a vehicle to launch them and further develop them. And we can see part of that development because of the Arathi Basin thing that, you know. And so, yeah, they may well, with Warfronts, put some smart NPCs in that as roving little squads too. That might make it indeed more interesting. And again, would be another way of developing those smart NPCs. If islands had stages like scenarios, it would give them some structure, perhaps interest. Just feels like wandering aimlessly. The thing is, when I remember back to that, that's a little bit like, you know, when you talk about the scenarios, like from MOP. I didn't always like that because, again, the scenarios were generally a chore to be done. And what I really didn't need was breaks in the middle of it all where you're waiting around. So if it's something that just has to be done, then do it. The caches that award class loot and not spec loot aren't fun. No? Well, again, loot is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? Like, the best item I've ever got in WoW, in any game, in fact, were the Corgi goggles. The Corgi goggles are now my most prized possession. I think they're amazing. Not even a possession, really, now. I think it's a toy. It's inside my bank slot, so it's actually a keybind. Speaking of toys, so what I've got here, of course, I'm sure everyone else has got this as well. So the toy we got this year for the Christmas thing, the Wintervale thing, whatever, was another Hearthstone toy where we do a little wintry dance when we use it. Now, with Hallow's End, we got one where you have a jack-o'-lantern thing and you do a little cackle as you go away. Is this going to be a thing now? Because that's now... The BFA's only been out for a few months and we've already got 2 Hearthstone toys where you do a seasonal thing. Do you think we're going to be getting these for every seasonal event? Are we going to have a whole collection of different Hearthstone toys by the end of BFA? Because that's something that slips under the radar. Warfronts currently are like LFR raiding. Well, at least you can't fail a Warfront. LFR can be failed. So they've actually created something that is more mindless than LFR. It's quite spectacular, isn't it? A complete clusterfuck of toxic dribble and moronic headless chicken spamming. Just need actual challenge. Yeah, well, the problem is, of course, when you queue up for anything at all, where you're going to be with strangers, there is no point in putting any challenge into it. Because, I mean, remember the days, because there have been times when LFR has been, and I can't say it's not in parts of Uldir, by the way, because I've not really done much LFR even in Uldir. I've really not done Uldir at all. You know, most of the time spent doing Uldir was in the beta testing. But anyway, there have been times in the past when some LFRs have been really properly challenging, and you will not kill the boss until people do it in a particular way, in the correct way. You know, Nazgrim was a classic example of Siege of Orgrimmar. There were a few others in MOP, the earliest start of MOP as well. What was it called? Shit, I can't remember now. But with things like Elagon and Darumo as well, wasn't all that straightforward on LFR. There have been some fights where basically you won't kill it until people sort of sort themselves out. And even in those situations, you generally found people still wouldn't talk and coordinate amongst each other very freely. So the idea of creating some content that you just queue up for that has challenge to it, I think is a non-starter. Because even when it becomes because I know people can think misty-eyed back to vanilla dungeons where people talked to each other and coordinated. And people sort of feel if only you brought back that level of challenge, people would be forced to do that. I think some actually challenging LFR fights have demonstrated that no, people won't. What will happen is you'll go through a few wipes and then maybe some people will be willing to listen. And maybe eventually you'll knock the boss over. But that's it. I'm looking well. I'm feeling all right. You know, it's just... it's the incision wounds more than anything now. I can drink whole mouthfuls, in fact. No challenge results in a worse situation as the community have now. It's not. It's like it's binary that when it comes to a queue up, challenge needs to be reserved for things where you make your own group. It's the only way it will work. We know it doesn't work when you put challenge into something where the reason why people will just queue up for a thing is because it's a chore. They just want to get it done, get it sorted, get out of there. You know, with as few words being spoken to their fellow humans as possible. Kill Jade and LFR proves my point. Well, potentially, yeah. I mean, I remember, because I did do Kill Jade and LFR quite a few times. And what I noticed was, when it first came out, it was all but impossible to kill it. First time, certainly. And the reason was because the DPS profile was always such that you inevitably ended up going into the Illidan phase with ads up, which was fatal. You tried telling the raid to stop attacking the boss to make sure the ads were dead first before you phased it. It never, ever happened. Whereas later on, when the natural DPS profile of a typical LFR group was such that the ads would not be up for the LFR for the Illidan phase, it was much smoother. Because yeah, it was and it to a raider or anyone who's at all used to even the most fundamental level of cooperative play, the idea of telling people, do not let this boss get to this percentage while there are ads up, should be simple. You say it in a raid warning, everyone's reading it, should be straightforward. Do people do it? No. And that, that is the issue. They just will not do it. The only reason why when people do start to say things, eventually a boss will die, is because enough people will do it. And in an LFR group, it might only need to be 10 people that do something vaguely sensible. How ridiculous it is that we have chores in a game, which is supposed to be an anti-chore. Game's been fun. Remember that thing a long time ago? I don't know. I mean, there are chores in like sports, aren't there? I mean, I loved playing badminton. I mean, I hope to play that again at some point. But badminton, judo, rugby, I used to enjoy playing these games. But what went alongside them was fitness training. I used to have to do that. That was a terrible chore. But I did it. I used to have to stretch before judo matches especially. And a bit of a warm-up before rugby as well. Not so much badminton. So you do have these chores. And the problem with an MMO is like a normal game, they bring it out and it's like right, here's the content. If you beat it in a month, great. If it takes you 3 months, fine. If it takes you a year to finish this game, that's okay. We've got your money. Here's your products. There you are. Obviously, a little bit different now when you've got some games where they sell you the game and then they want you to pay for microtransactions on top of it. But where they need you to keep paying them money, such as with a subscription, they can't obviously create content at the same rate as we consume it. So they have to have chores. It's unfortunate, but I think when you're talking about a game like an MMO, it is a fact. Obviously, the balance of chore to just fun part that you would do even without reward, I think it's shifted with World of Warcraft too much to the chore side of it. But what unexpected change would I like to see in 8.2? Do you know what I would like to see? Unexpected change for 8.2. I'm not even kidding. You know that new gnome zone we're going to be getting? Okay, we're going to get a new gnome zone. What I would love is for every gnome on Azeroth to go, oh, we've discovered our long lost home. We should all make a pilgrimage there. They all rush into it. And then we get some goblins to dynamite the entrance, seal them in. That's all the gnomes taken care of. They can enjoy their long lost home and they're not coming out. Every gnome on Azeroth taken care of in one stroke. What gnome zone? So in 8.2, we're getting a couple of new zones, as was the case, well, the last couple of expansions, really. One of them is a zone related to Ashara, which is actually not going to be an underwater one, which I'm sort of pleased about, but it all sounds very dodgy. But there's a new zone related to that, which is where, of course, the Ashara raid is going to be. And there's also a zone which is like some long ancient city of the gnomes, which I'm hoping will be populated with mechanical gnomes, because I have no issue with the mechanical gnomes. They're useful to us. They repair our gear. They give us little presents. They fight for our amusement. It's the fleshy ones that are the problem. They don't do any of those things. So yeah. Those are sports. This is a game. That's a game and a sport are basically the same thing. It's just that when people say sport, they tend to... well, basically, the definition of a sport is a competitive game of skill. That's actually the textbook definition of a sport. So the only reason why there is a separate word game is because not all games are games of skill. Snakes and Ladders, for example, is not a game of skill, but it's a game. You know. So in actual fact, World of Warcraft, if you're a PvP player, like especially for arenas, rate of battlegrounds, even Rage, you could argue in terms of world first positions or world positions, can be classed as a sport. Esports are definitely sports. The E in front of esports is not because it's different to a sport, but it's sort of like one. It is a sport. It's a competitive game of skill. But anyway, hang on, not for all people of the Iron Templar. What have I missed? Oh, sorry. The argument can be made that the game started being less fun when Blizzard merged with Activision and their anti-consumer practices became more prevalent. I think different people will have different views on when it happened. And obviously, I cannot say that there was a definite change when Activision acquired it. What I would say, however, it's a little bit like when Hong Kong was returned to China. Initially, it was seen as this goose that lays the golden eggs, and they didn't want to have it subsumed within the normal Chinese system. So that's why they came up with this phrase, one nation, two systems, one nation, whatever the hell it was. Obviously, over time, that influence, that oppressive influence, has crept more and more into Hong Kong. And I think it's the same thing here. If Blizzard had have carried on absolutely rocking it in terms of the returns, the money, then I think they would have been able to stave off interference. I think that the situation they've got themselves in now, and this is only my perception, I can't know this, I think because they've failed on a number of fronts, and it's not just World of Warcraft, you know, they've failed with Heroes of the Storm. They've basically pulled... And you know, that's a classic game that would be perfect as an esport. I don't even know... I'm not into the esports thing, so I really don't know what happened. But that's no longer going to be funded as an esport, is it? So obviously that's failed in terms of their stated intentions. So, you know, Blizzard as a whole has not done well, which means I imagine it's difficult to keep the wolves from the door. You know, if you believe that Activision are the wolves. So, and it's now impossible, probably, for them to say, leave us alone, we know what we're doing. Because actually the response will be, no, you don't. But anyway, would I have gnomes fighting to the death in a gladiatorial arena? Well, we can already do that with Blinktrons. That's what I mean. But no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't have fleshy gnomes fighting to death in an arena. And do you know why? Because of all the squeaking. This squeaking would be immense. That would be horrible. It's a terrible sound. It's like the worst sound in life. How long will they keep us from flying in BFA? I think it'll be the same as in Legion and WoD. So, hang on, when would it be? So I think 8.2 is when we would get Pathfinder Part 2. That's how it works in the last couple of expansions, isn't it? It's that 0.2 patch, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm pretty sure that's when it would come, 8.2. So here's the curious thing. If in just as in Legion, are they going to bring out flying at a time when we've got to go to some new zones where flying's not allowed? Because I bet that gnome zone isn't going to have flying because it's supposed to be underground. I mean, it might be Deep Home has flying. But, you know. Because I always felt, you know, obviously the flying thing, Blizzard didn't want flying in the game ever again back in WoD. And then there was a massive backlash. It's the only time I've ever seen such a backlash, and it caused them to backtrack immediately. It's quite shows you the power that the community can have if it talks with one voice. But there's no other issue that the whole community feels as strongly about. So, but they did it reluctantly. So then in Legion, I thought it was quite hilarious that they brought out flying at a time when we had to go and do 3 new zones where no flying was allowed. And I thought to myself, I reckon that's then been a bit petulant, you know, but we'll see. If in BFA they do the same thing, then we know it's deliberate. So 8.2, if those 2 new zones don't have flying in them, then it's deliberate. It's them basically saying, screw you for making us put flying in when we don't want it in. Blizzard's simply grown to be a huge corporation. Seems more simple an explanation. Well, I think the growth has certainly created coordination problems. I mean, one of my biggest gripes about the WoW development team is it's not coordinated. So as the team has got bigger, and remember it grew rapidly a few years ago, it doubled in size. And it seemed to me, and still seems to me, that no one at the time understood the need to coordinate and to put systems in place to allow for coordination. So the leadership structure is not fit for purpose, you know. But yeah, I mean, I certainly don't subscribe to this is all Activision's fault. It may be, it may not be. There have been a few rumours. Now, there's obviously different levels of rumours. Some rumours are just that, rumours. Some of them tend to have a bit more credibility depending on who seems to verify them. And there have been some of those plausible, shall we say, rumours, but still rumours, that there is a feeling within Blizzard from the developers that Activision are now pulling the strings. Now, that's not definitive proof, of course. It's not even really strong evidence because none of this can be attributed to people who work there. However, given that there are some people who will soon not be working there, it'd be interesting to see what they say. That being said, when someone leaves a company, they're also not necessarily the most reliable person because they may be just a disgruntled ex-employee. So it's all very difficult to find the truth without having inside knowledge, which I don't in this case. One thing that people do is bandwagon, be that positive or negatively. People are bad at discernment. And when Blizz slips up with a couple of things, people over-scrutinise every little move. Yeah, but when they slip up in the same way over and over again, you know something's not right and that it's not, that they're not addressing it. So, I don't know. But anyway. Of course, Blizzard has failed quite badly in some instances. The long content droughts in MoP and WoD can attest to that. Legion was fine for the first few months, but it quickly felt mindless. I don't know. You know, I thought Legion was a good expansion, I have to say. I mean, Mists of Pandaria still remains my favourite expansion. But I would put Legion in the top 3, certainly. I'll let you work out what the other one would be. It might not be what you think. Blizzard hates trolls, but yet they troll their own playbase. See, that's another thing. That is something that really started in WoD. It seemed to subside a little in Legion, but it clearly didn't go away. When they... And that's the thing. And what I tell you, what I find really weird is it's not like it's just Blizzard doing this. It's game studios in general are treating their customers like shit. And I don't just mean churning out a product when it's not ready. That may not be the developer's faults. That may be the money people going, no, release it now, get the money in, and then we'll fix it later. That could be a financial decision. But when you've got them on their own forums attacking, and it's not just Blizzard that have done this, attacking their own players, that is something that the development team have direct control over. And that is entirely down to them. And it's ridiculous. It's absolute madness. There's none of the accountants are telling them to do that. It doesn't make financial sense to alienate your player base. I don't know why they're doing it. I really don't. They used to have a really good relationship with their player base, Blizzard. Really good. Blizzard, the small indie company. Yeah, it's neither small nor indie, is it? Bobby Kotick's fault. I don't know if it's any one person's fault. Flying should be a feature limited to certain vertical regions of a given zone. See, well, the thing is, I'm with Blizzard. I don't think flying should be in the game at all, other than Griffin taxes. That should be it. I thought the game was poorer for the introduction of flying. It was okay in Outland. You got away with it in Outland. They should have stopped. They should have just had it as a thing for that expansion. The reason why people is WoD in the top 3 now. Although I did enjoy my time in WoD, but as an expansion, as an objective view of an expansion now. But the reason why there was this backlash with the flying thing in WoD was because it had been in the game for 10 years or something? I can't remember now. About that, more maybe. So it's no, hold on. No, it can't be more. Behave. Maybe 8 years. 8 or 9 years. So at this point, it's been in the game for a long time. It's now a staple part of the game. It was in TBC, it was in Wrath of the Lich King, it was in Cataclysm, it was in Mists of Pandaria. That's it. It's now an established core feature of the game. That's where they went wrong. If it was always just put in for TBC, I mean, I'd have still said don't even put it in for TBC, because even giving people a taste of it might have had them want it for other things. They just shouldn't have put it in the game. I do agree with Blizzard that it makes the world feel smaller, and also it makes the art team less inclined to put lots of nice, interesting little details in the terrain, because you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it all. So, you know. But it's in. And once it's in, you can't take it away. Speaking of shit, every expansion has a poop pickup quest. Does everyone? I don't remember one in everyone. You list the ones in every expansion. I don't remember it in all of them. There's been a few. Now, of course, I may have missed the odd one, but I'm pretty sure there's not been one in everyone. It seems like more and more are using pre-purchase as a way of getting money in advance. Yes, little mate, this is the key thing. Advance orders. And we fall for it. The thing is, right, someone was putting a comment about advance orders on one of my videos this week. And they said something like, they pre-ordered because they expected to be able to play a Zandalari Troll and Kulturan Human when BFA launched, and they felt cheated because it hadn't. Now, in that particular case, what I would say is, what you should do is think to yourself, okay, you didn't have to pre-order it in January in order to be able to do that. You should have waited. Think about what is the thing about the pre-order that you want. And then think to yourself, when am I going to get it? And don't pre-order it until you're going to get it. Right? I wanted access, like a lot of people, to the allied races. I wanted a Void Elf. So I got it straight away. But with digital downloads, it's not like they're going to sell out of the collector's edition. The physical collector's edition, yes. The digital ones, no. So if you're only going to get the digital one, don't pre-order it until the bonus that you want is available. At least do that. But yes, it's absolutely the case that pre-orders almost if not actually encourage them to release games before they're ready, because when you release a pre-order, that means you have to set a date, even though with the pre-order it was like a maximum date rather than the actual date. And then you tie your development team's hands. If they can't get everything done by that time, then you're screwed. You know, oh God, so many comments now all of a sudden. You need to pace yourselves. Hold on. God, I've gone too far now. Head of DICE who literally suggested players not buy BF5 if they don't like it. Oh yeah, I remember that. Battlefront 5. And they did, didn't they? They basically did it. It's like the world went, all right, we won't buy it then. I remember that. I don't play Battlefront, but I remember that. 7. Yeah, spectacular. 7. Can you imagine in any other business, the business owner saying, well, we don't want your custom. And then everyone walks, all right then. It's like 7.3.5 was the most fun and complete because the legendary grind was done and people could customize their play styles. I was very pleased when the artifact power grinder stopped, but then that just attests to the fact that artifact power as a system is a bad system. The reason is because it's not, serious players are going to subscribe anyway. It's not for serious players. And yet the only people who care about it are serious players. Aren't you? You can't link things. I can't attest to it. You have to list them. I want you to do TBC. That poop picking up in Nagrand. Wrath. Shitting acorns out. And then so on. Because I actually don't remember any of this. I'm sure there are. God, I forgot what I was saying now. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. No. Yeah? No. Shit, I'm getting old. Yes, artifact power. Sorry. Casual. I can now speak as a casual player. I don't give a shit about it. I do not give a crap about artifact power. Because the content I'm doing doesn't require that I mean, I did some heroic Uldir for basically the first time outside of testing in the past few days this weekend. And I was competing fine on damage. And we didn't kill the last boss, admittedly, but that wasn't because of damage. That was because, I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing, if I'm honest. I sort of do now. I'd forgotten it all, basically, since testing. I now would do a better job, but I did shit the bed a few times. So I was competing. So I don't even need it to do heroic Uldir, which is like the hardest thing I would ever do now as a casual player. And I haven't even done that. And so it's worthless. So it's not going to encourage a casual player to keep subscribing. And it has no effect on a serious player either, because they're going to subscribe anyway. Because they want to do the content. So who's it for? I used to think it was for casual players. In Legion, I used to think this was something to encourage casual players to stay subscribed. But as a casual player now, I'm thinking, no. Am I using the Inquisition talent? I still frequently do. It still seems a bit higher for me. But obviously, you know, with new glyphs, depends on what Azerite pieces I'm able to get. At the moment, basically none. Because I'm not doing anything that gives me the doof residuum. But Crusade obviously can look quite good for a few fights as well. Anyway, sorry, I'm going to find stuff. Playing Wadder's Horde seemed pointless and boring. You tried as Alliance and noticed that it was a war against evil forces of the Void. Could Wadder be more successful if they'd finished content? Oh, of course. Yes, it could. The reason why they didn't finish content, though, is because of the core systems within the game that were unpopular. It was all based around garrisons, remember. That was their core feature. And people did not take to garrisons. They should have done player housing, and then it would have been fine. What are my thoughts on the Azerite changes they're going to do? Do you think we'll, like in Legion, have a small talent tree in the neck with something like Concordance? No. I mean, although I've heard of a few things that they may be doing to Azerite pieces, I think they're improving the system. I don't think they'll ever make it into something that I think is a good system. I think it's fundamentally flawed. You did buy another copy of BFA on the sale for your second EU account. Well, I bought it on both my accounts at the same time, actually, back in January. When you have people buying mounts for real money. Well, the thing is, though, I mean, this is what I said before with the Dreadwake. They got that promotion completely wrong. Because, first of all, they made you buy a 6-month sub instead of just 6 months worth of sub. And secondly, it was 6 months. If they'd have offered that, if they'd have just said, right, if you stay subscribed for the next 3 months, you get this mount, I'll bet you they would have made way, way more money. And it's a digital reward at the end of the day. You know, obviously there's an artist that has to produce it, but you work out the cost it's for the company. They would have way more than made their money back. And of course, they wouldn't have pissed off a load of players who I mean, I have been subscribed when the well, okay, it hasn't been 6 months yet, but 6 months after that Dreadwake promotion, I will have been subscribed every month on at least 2 accounts. I've actually let my NA1 slip at the moment because I'm not playing it, but I will get it back at some point. And yet I'm not going to get it. Now, I could have got it. I just decided I wasn't that bothered about it in the end. I mean, that's just a sort of madness. You know, and that's what really worries me. They don't even know how to get money out of their customers. I mean, bloody hell. But yeah, I don't see them. I do see them improving the Azerite system. It's not that they're stupid, but I just don't see them. I don't see them making it into a good system. And the thing that depresses me most of all, they'll make it decent enough, I suppose, by the end of the expansion. And then they'll be coming up with a different system for the next one, won't they? You don't know about the huge negativity. There are tons of bugs, but the game is still enjoyable if you have people to play with. Yes, it is. That is why I'm still playing it. However, for a lot of people, it's not fun. That is ultimately why... Oh, God. Shit. Sorry, I've just pulled a wound dressing off trying to adjust my shirt. Repatch myself up later. There's so many people who now don't find it fun. And when you add on to that, the fact that they also feel a bit cheated because it was brought out when it wasn't ready. You know, there are quite a lot of people, in fact, who would have carried on staying subscribed to Legion for a couple more months if it would have meant a better launch of BFA. That's the situation they're faced with. And it's the situation a lot of game studios are finding, that there's players that are just basically saying, we don't want to buy your unfinished shit. But again, it comes back to the pre-order thing, isn't it? It's like, oh, you've already bought it. Because if they didn't do pre-orders, there is no way in hell they would, and I'm not just talking about Blizzard, these game studios would be releasing these games like they are now. It's basically our fault for buying the pre-orders. Mage Tower, you need one in BFA. The Mage Tower was a spectacular... If you think about all the really popular, and I mean genuinely popular pieces of content in BFA. So, one, obviously Mythic Plus Dungeons. Okay, they've gone with that. They've upgraded it. Brilliant. Secondly, was collecting the different skins for the artifact weapon, which of course ties into the Mage Tower. That was also a very popular piece of content. And the time-limited aspect to it. Although you had plenty of time, you knew you weren't going to be able to do it once Legion finished. That was also good. You know. I would say... I don't think the Chromie thing was very good. I didn't even bother with it at all. But the Withered Army training was also good. But it was a shame that was only there at the start of the expansion. And that didn't get built on. But that was really good. You know. I mean, I'd have quite liked with the Withered Army training for there to have been a different location. And done a different version in 8.1 and another version 8.2 and so on. Notice how you pay something like 11 quid for the US account because of money differences. No, I haven't really noticed, if I'm honest. It is possible, yeah. Instead of putting in some gimmick for the 10 levels, they need to put in something universal and just focus on gear and actual content like raids and dungeons. Well, I mean, I've already said I don't agree with leveling at all at the moment. There's no value in leveling. You get nothing from leveling. It's nothing. If I'm not going to get anything for getting a level, because there's other, I mean, I get comments about this as well, and this is perfectly understandable. So with scaling now, and scaling's a really good thing, but when you don't get anything for a level, it looks like a bad thing, because you're going up a level and you're actually getting weaker. Who wants to go up a level in a role-playing game and be weaker? Because that's what scaling does to you if you don't get anything. Because you've dinged, you've got the same gear on, unless you've got heirloom gear scales up, but that only goes up to a certain point. So you've got that gear on now, but all the ratings of those gear mean they're lower percentage crit, haste, and all the rest of it. So you are weaker. All your mobs, all those enemies are now a level higher, but your gear isn't. Now, that would be fine. In games where scaling works, it all works fine, as long as you get something for getting a level. And you don't in WoW. That's where it's wrong. That's where it goes wrong. Do I think the Mythic Raider pool has diminished? No. There are more people doing Mythic Raiding now than ever. And that was the case in Legion as well. In Legion, there was a huge explosion in the number of people doing Mythic Raiding. That's continued in BFA. That being said, I would say there is more of a shortage of what I would term, without trying to be an elitist prick, suitable Mythic Raiders. Mythic Raiders with the right mindset. You know, my experience in Legion was that there was an awful lot that didn't really have the mindset for Mythic Raiding progress. And that hampers a lot of guilds. But the pool is certainly not, in fact, larger. It's bigger. Loads of people do it now. And I think that's because it's so much more accessible. You know, Legion started it. I mean, you could argue things like Titan Forging meant and you know, the improvements to the crafted gear that you could upgrade meant that it was much quicker to get yourself ready. Obviously, artifact power worked against it, but for a single character that had, you know, chosen to play that particular thing, you could get yourself ready for Mythic Raiding. BFA is probably very similar in that regards, but I can't speak personally from that because I've not done any Mythic Raiding. No army training. No, I would just get them all killed. I would just deliberately feed them to the monsters. I think it's for all intents and purposes, get weaker in RPGs because you move on to harder challenge and comparatively you are weaker. But I don't find that in other role-playing games. I get stronger in other role-playing games. I used to get stronger in World of Warcraft because you would get new abilities. And you don't need a new ability every level. You need something. How big would I say the Mythic Raiding pool is? Right, okay. I can't remember offhand. It's a while since I've sort of tried to look it up. Can I do that quickly? I don't think I would be able to do it reliably quickly. Let's try and have a little quick look. No, I don't. I'll have to look at it very quickly. But I would say, I mean, it depends what you mean by population as well. Do you mean of all WoW accounts, or do you mean the ones that get to level cap? Because remember, there's an awful lot of WoW accounts that never actually get to level cap. Obviously, they are never going to access Mythic Raiding. But I think something like, of the ones that get to level cap, you could be talking something like 20 to 30% will have done some Mythic Raid, even if it's only the first boss on Mythic. Will have done something and therefore be Mythic Raiders. Hello from America. Hey, Fitinator. Which part are you from though? Didn't I see in the news a few days ago New York's sky went blue? There was a little bit of an electrical explosion from a power plant or something and the sky went blue. Weird. I bet UFO Monthly went mad. Redo or replace the current ones we have now. Hold on, what? Oh, you think we'll ever see a new talent? We've got our last at level 100. No, I don't. I mean, we might. It wouldn't surprise me if they revamped the talent system, though. I think it could be due for a revamp, rather than just an extra row. Mythic Raiding has grown as first two bosses are much easier than Gahoon. So best plan is to get the first two Mythic bosses before going for Curve. Well, that's another thing as well, yes. Indeed. And that is sometimes the case, that the first Mythic bosses can be easier than the Heroic. Because Heroic Gahoon is actually tricky. It is tricky. Said it before, but the way Mastery is introduced as Lane Beyond Words, it really needs to be expanded into a new one max talent system. Well, I don't know about that. It wasn't aliens, was the official report. No, the official report was it was a bit of a mishap with a power station, like I don't know, an electrical converter went. Oh, you're in Ohio, okay. No fun explosions there. But yeah, no, the talent system. Like, I mean, they make the point, and it's not an invalid point, that if you just keep adding rows onto it, then the more combinations you've got for customizing like abilities, the more difficult it is to balance. That's where the Azerite trait system was a really bad idea. It just creates so many variables and so difficult to balance. It's almost like then you have to allow some traits to be the best ones to take, because then your balancing job becomes easier. You know, if you add another level on, you're raising the number of combinations of talents to another power of 3, and it makes it that much more difficult to balance. And it makes, because remember with the old talent, the reason why they didn't like the old talent trees, they kept saying they didn't like the cookie cutter thing about it. All right, but I think really what it was is because sometimes people were able to come up with combinations of talent that made them hideously overpowered, such as the mage who, for example, during tier 7 version of Nax, was able to solo it. You know, they were soloing trash and bosses in Naxxramas whilst it was current. This wasn't later in the expansion, whilst it was current. But, you know. Seems like we'll probably get a level squish instead of new talents. I still don't know. I know he opened the door a crack on level squish. You've got to remember, when he first addressed the issue, he basically said, look, you know how much of a mess it was when we did the stat and item level squish, which it was. It was, you know, the game basically broke and it took him quite a while to get it all fixed. What he said was, if we do a level squish, bloody hellfire, you ain't seen nothing yet. So then at BlizzCon, yes, admittedly, he said, look, we're looking for feedback. What do you think? Would you want a level squish? But you also noticed that before finishing that statement, he didn't just ask the question, he put a negative view of level squish in people's minds. So it may be one of those like political surveys where he wants to pretend that he's inviting feedback, but his conclusions have already been drawn and that there won't be a level squish. I do not think they want to do a level squish at all. Now, it would be nice to think that some techie has said, actually, we could do it if we did it like this, and that maybe they're genuinely considering it, but I strongly suspect they are not. Maybe the trait should just be more directly effective spells like the usual glyphs. No, I think, you know, like the artifact weapon system was a much better system from this point of view because you got all the abilities. Therefore, balancing was much easier. The only variation was towards the start of the expansion. And you quickly at least got the major ones, the ones that, you know, added the most damage. And then there was, you know, some more later on as well. But again, the better players got those quickly. So, or the more serious players. So that was much easier to balance it around. Whereas when you've got different traits, and especially, I mean, they're effectively increasing that now because you've got your 2 traits on the rings now with the stuff that's coming. Not now, but the stuff that's coming in Battle for Dazalor, in the thing, that place. So that's going to, in theory, if they tried to balance all the traits, would make it way harder. But I think they've abandoned the idea of trying to balance all the traits. I think they're happy for there to be some traits that you really want, and leave it at that, and balance us around people having those traits. The problem is if you don't get those traits, that's when you're in trouble, because then your class, your spec is balanced around having traits you don't have. So it's just a mess. It's just a terrible idea. The Azerite trait system, terrible idea, I think. Warriors in Burning Crusade, before they nerfed it with the Lionheart. So the Lionheart Execution was a marvellous sword. I used that. I killed, whatchamacallit, for the first time with that. Shit. Archimond. It's in my kill video. Level squish doesn't add anything new. It's more of a cosmetic change. You get a spell when you ding more. Yeah, but that's better. You know, it means that you... Well, one, it's not as daunting. I know that there are new players who are daunted by the number of levels. Because again, another problem that World of Warcraft has, which is not the case with all MMOs, but it is with some, is the leveling game is very different to the end game. And it's the end game content that's advertised to you. You don't get to do that. So when you start playing World of Warcraft, yes, all right, there's the free character boost. But most people probably shouldn't use that. And if they do, they might use it on the wrong character or something, wanted to start again anyway. So a brand new player is going to be leveling up. They're not going to get to do islands. They're not going to get to do Warfronts. They're not going to get Azerite traits. They're not going to get artifact power. They're not going to do world quests. They're not going to do any of the things that are advertised until they've played for about 3 months. Depending on how long you play a day, of course. And that's a big problem when the leveling game is massively detached from the end game. You have a problem. Because it might be that people would really like the end game, but they don't like the leveling game. So they won't persist with it. You thought the artifact tree was rubbish precisely because you got them all and no choice. Well, yeah, that's because you want more choice, but more choice means harder to balance. It means classes are less balanced. So, you know, you take your poison, really. You know, there's pros and cons to anything. More choice, less balance. That's what you like with the current talent system. At each level, you've got a point to spend. You make a little bit stronger. See, I mean, my idea for this, my compromise idea, was that instead of an old style talent tree, you'd have something that looks like the old style talent tree. But in actual fact, it just, instead of you just getting core abilities as you ding at certain times, you pick points. It's like skill points. You know, you follow this tree down and, you know, you get a level, you get a point, you spend it on, and sometimes you're able to spend it on a new ability, so you get that. And then other times you use it on improving that ability. So it's like a skill point spent to get, say, Holy Light, and then you can spend another 5 points making it stronger. And then at the end of when you're level cap, you filled it all in. So there's no choice really. You have filled it all in, but your choice was the route you took. And it means you get something every level. You get a point to spend. It's something at least. You know, it's a little sliver of something that makes you feel your character has gained in power. That would be an acceptable compromise for me. The traits are pretty underwhelming. Well, I don't know. I think some are interesting. I like some of them. Some of them obviously are. Again, I liken that to the artifact weapon system. Some of them had interactivity. Some of them were just passive. And it's a bit like that with this. It would only be a problem if it was a passive one that was the best. What you ideally want is one that's got some interactivity being the best one. You know, that would be better. And I can't say that they're doing that for every spec. But that's obviously what they would aim to do. As someone who quit in BFA, you feel like they should be looking to Final Fantasy 14. Feels more like WoW than WoW does. See, that was not one I could get into myself. But obviously, you know, Final Fantasy 14, Elder Scrolls Online both have good reputations for catering to their player base in a way that WoW used to, doesn't anymore. Anytime you gate abilities on behind specific piece of gear, it's trouble. You create a situation where you have to balance with both the haves and have-nots, which is close to impossible. Well, I think you'll find they don't balance it around the have-nots. They don't see that as a dilemma. They balance it around the haves. And actually, that's not a bad way of doing it, because the haves are going to be the serious players. It's only the serious players that even notice. Most players do not notice, because when we're talking about balance, we're not talking, they're not going to have a spec that does like 20% more damage than another spec. It's not that bad. It's a few percent. But that can make all the difference to top level play. But for most players, you know, they're not going to notice. Most players, if they're bad at the game, just assume their character's underpowered anyway. They could be playing the most broken spec in the game, and they'll go on the forums and say how weak it is and how strong everything else is if they're bad at the game and can't do stuff on it. But they certainly don't have a critical view of balance in the same way that serious players do. But you'll take underwhelming traits over Legion's artifact relic hunting. Oh yeah, the relics weren't good. But I mean, what I'd have done, I'd have just replaced the artifact weapon, if they had to at all, with the neck and just had something like that on the neck, but no relics. It's like the artifact weapon, but without the relics. That would have been better. But I just wish they would get rid of artifact power. I just really don't see it as a positive thing. And I used to think, as I say in Legion, I used to think I understood why it was something they would put in the game, but now I don't. You mean is the implication that it should take half as long to get to cap if they squish down to 60? Well, you also know my view on that. It should take a damn sight less time as well. But even if it didn't, it's the numbers. I think it's important in an MMO that you should be able to get a level in no more than 3 hours, though. I would never suggest that it should take more than 3 hours, or around about. I'm not doing that exactly. Let's say 2.98 hours to get a level. Because, you know, a decent evening's play, you shouldn't be able to put in a decent evening's play. And I know a decent evening's play for some people might be 8 hours, but that's too much. Put that much in and not get a level. Especially in a game, like I've already said, where the end game is so very different to the leveling game. You would like Will of the Ashbringer back. Yeah, I miss that for a bit. Just go back to making everything baseline and keep rental abilities on raid gear. Yeah, but then people who don't do raids moan. What if they stopped increasing level but kept increasing item level in expansions? Yeah, totally. I mean, that's what I would do. Yeah, I have no idea what that is. If that's a sub for sub, though, that's the stupidest thing anyone's ever said. That's exactly what they should do. They should just stop the leveling, and there is nothing wrong with just, you know, each expansion comes out, you get a higher item level of gear. Don't need the levels. We don't need levels. Why remove track undead? Was it overpowered? No, but it's all part of their... They don't want us to have too many abilities. I mean, after all, if we have too many abilities, they won't be able to turn WoW into a mobile game, will they? They've got to cut them down. No one wants to feel like they're weaker because they're at a lower AP level. You know, I don't care. Casuals don't care. That's my issue with AP. Serious players, it's a chore for them, and it's not an incentive to stay subscribed. In fact, in anything, it might be an incentive to unsubscribe, because if they can't be asked, I know this happened in Legion. There were a lot of raiders that quit, good raiders that quit raiding because they couldn't be asked with all the artifact power farming. They could not be asked with it. So if it doesn't even have the advantage from Blizzard's point of view of attracting casual players, and obviously I can't say that it doesn't, but my perception now as a casual player is I don't give a shit about it, then I'm thinking it's just such a bad system. You don't think they will do anything with levels as they have that covered in the shop? Not that you like that idea. Well, I don't think they will, just because I think I think it's going to be technically challenging. They don't want that. Speaking of ESA, you tried it out when they had their gold additional sale, but all the additional DLC not included with it as a giant turn off. When you're just playing it to start with, though, you don't really need the DLCs to begin with, do you? And you basically get that when you subscribe. It's a good game to subscribe to. Flavor abilities are fun, though. Yes, flavor abilities are fun. Hence the... I mean, that's what we have toys for now, isn't it? Flavor abilities. You know, like the little Christmassy dance with the new Hearthstone. And the, you know, Jack-o'-lantern cackle with the Hallows Eve one. Eye level inflation is so bad with the 4 tiers, they'd have to reset it every 2 expansions. Without levels, would there be the illusion of progression? It would be actual progression. WoW has always been a gear-orientated game. It's one of my bugbears that Blizzard don't understand that they can get us to do more content with more cosmetic rewards. although there are more cosmetic rewards than there were, say, 6 years ago, they still don't fully understand and appreciate how much casual people would play this game if they had player housing and loosened the bloody purse strings on transmog. You know, but it's a gear-focused game. We progress by getting better gear. That's how we progress in this game. That is how we progress on virtually every piece of content, by getting a higher item level. So it wouldn't be an illusion of progression. That is the progression either way. Levels aren't even a progression system in WoW. It's all about item level. And it always has been. Well, obviously there wasn't such a thing as item level before, but having better gear. But yeah, the eye level inflation is really bad by having multiple difficulties of the same tier of content. But, you know, they're not going to stop that. You feel like story-wise the characters are beyond needing more levels to be stronger. We dismantled the Burning Legion and killed old gods. How much stronger do we need to get? Well, exactly. Precisely. You know, we beat up a planet, for goodness sake. We smashed a planet in the face. Well, all right, I smashed it in the ankles. I'm pretty sure some mages were smashing it in the face. Yeah, exactly. I mean, do you know what? This is a worry I had when I was playing the Wrath of the Lich King beta. Because it was like vanilla was... I loved vanilla because it didn't have a central theme. It gave you a taste of lots of different aspects of Azeroth. You had, you know, your first tier, which was all about Elemental Lord, you know, Ragnaros. Then you had Nefarian, so Dragonflights. Then you had Anchorage, Old Gods. And then you had Kel'Thuzad, you know, the Scourge. You know, so it introduced you to a different theme each tier, which was marvellous. Then we had TBC, which had the overarching theme of Illidan. Which was okay, was all right. But it had its other little themes as well, obviously Burning Legion. So, you know, that was okay. But then when I got into the Wrath of the Lich King beta, because so far we'd just been beating up villains. And I remember flying around, was it Storm Peaks, whatever the hell it's called. And you had all this Titan construct, all these huge buildings. And it was like, when I first started playing World of Warcraft, you remember going to Alderman. And, you know, it's all about discovering evidence that the Titans actually exist. Because in the official lore, although Titans obviously did exist, the people of Azeroth, it was a myth to them. They didn't actually have evidence that the Titans ever existed. And then you were finding it. All of a sudden you got to Wrath of the Lich King and it was there staring you in the face. And I felt at the time, is the game getting too epic? Is it too huge? Because now we know Titans are a thing. They're there. They're Titan constructs are there walking around. And just think how much more epic it's got since. It's beyond farce now. Hi, John. Yes, I did survive my operation. I have to say, just as a little aside though, I had obviously since the operation, I've been almost non-stop. Well, not actually non-stop, but spending several hours a day watching documentaries, watching other people going through this and looking at the results 6 weeks later, 6 months later, that sort of thing. Just trying to see what I can expect. And I watched one today where it was a very rare case, but the person didn't actually survive the surgery. But the risk factors this person had were ridiculous. Whereas in my case, you know, I didn't have... The only risk factor I had is that I was obese, but this is obesity surgery. These are surgeons who are used to doing this. I had no other risk factors. I had no realistic... I had no realistic chance of actually being in serious trouble. So, yes. You want BIS that motivates you. Call me a casual mythic raid if you want. That's what makes you happy. You ain't ever getting BIS. No such thing as BIS. Used to be. Not anymore. No. Because if you got BIS, you would stop doing it. Because Blizzard is convinced that people only do content to become more powerful. They want the gear. They're all loot whores, and they think the rest of us are loot whores as well. So they can't allow us ever to get BIS. They tried it with Thunderforge first and then Warforge. Didn't quite work. So then they went, right, Titan Forge, be bloody impossible then. That's what we'll do. So there we go. Better cloaks too, ones that flow and torn. Well, that's an art department issue rather than developer issue. But it would be, I admit, obviously anything that reduces clipping and anything like that in your character is going to be a good thing. At the same time, I accept a certain amount of clipping. Alts could add stuff to your house like class and race specific items that unlock at certain levels. Yeah, there's so much you could do with player housing. It's untrue how much more engagement they would get and how many more subscribers they would get. It's just, I don't understand how they can be so stupid. I really don't. There's an arrogance in Blizzard that I could understand it. An arrogance being born of the fact you are the basic king of MMOs and you created this phenomenon of a game. But the problem is the people who are in charge of development now are not the people who achieved those dizzying heights. They're the ones who've taken over since. You know. It's a bit like the phrase, isn't it, from Saruman to Theoden in Lord of the Rings. You are a lesser son of greater sires. That's how I feel about the current senior leadership of World of Warcraft. It's bad that WoW is gear progression focused and dress up game mostly. All the content isn't important out, but that's just their attitude. They do not understand how much, even though whenever they do put some content in with cosmetic rewards behind it, people do it. I don't know how they cannot just put two and two together. Did we discuss the chief financial officer being fired for unspecified cause? Well, we mentioned it, but not really. I mean, apart from the fact when it's unspecified, there's nothing really to discuss. It's not that weird. I have worked in a place where obviously a much smaller place than Blizzard, where our chief financial officer was fired because they were not keeping an eye on the finances and the budget went out of control. And, we got into a lot of shit. And the boss had to go to the bank and all the rest of it. So I have experienced this. I'm not saying there was any financial mismanagement going on, and I think they were going anyway. But no, we haven't really discussed it because I don't know what there is to discuss other than to try and guess a load of stuff. But I'll leave that to tabloid newspapers. I don't like to do too much guessing if I don't have to, unless it's really interesting. And there's nothing less interesting than accountancy. If I'd have been even remotely interested in financial operations, you don't think I'd have, with my degree in physics, gone off and been a teacher. I'd have gone off and been an accountant, earning pots of money for doing next to no work. But I'm afraid I find financial affairs dull. It's probably why I'm poor all the time. You want to feel in a larger world, a smaller world, make your mind up. You want to feel in a small world. What, is this related to flying again? There's a reason a lot of people thought WoW peaked at Wrath. I know there's a lot of reason people think that, and I think they're almost all wrong. Particularly for the people who started playing in Wrath, they didn't really appreciate. Basically, World of Warcraft, there was a perfect storm that allowed it to explode. Yes, it was a really good game produced by a company, a game studio, that really cared about putting quality stuff out there. However, there was already, there was a few things. There was already a burgeoning MMO player base. It occurred at round about the time that in various developed countries, the UK included and America, more people were getting broadband. It was becoming more affordable to get decent broadband. That makes a hell of a difference when it comes to playing an MMO. What else was happening? I think more people were just getting computers full stop. Probably has to be said. People of my generation who grew up with the very earliest computer games were now adults. And then you also had kids playing as well. So the range of ages of people playing computer games was also expanding at that point. You know, there was an awful lot of things that were happening at the right time for it. And I'm not saying it would have happened to any game that came out at the same time. Obviously, it had to be a quality product as well. Also, it had a huge following from its Warcraft games. So it had its own following already. It wasn't like a company bringing out an MMO that didn't have a ready-made player base to start playing it as well. There were so many things. Ian started in Wrath, as you recall. Did it? I can't remember. Happy New Year, Dr. Sinister. You want to feel small in a large world. Oh, I see. Okay, I get you now. Yeah, well, you don't get that with flying, do you? WoW peaked in Wrath because they made dungeons a mindless face roll. I don't think it did. The thing is, all right, I'm gonna have a look at this. Let's hold on. I'm gonna have to ignore you for a moment. Let's just find the graph if I can find it. Right. Can I need to save this image as something. Right, let's see if I can find it really quickly, because we need a chart at this point. I feel we need a chart. See if you can find the file. There we go. Right, here's our chart. So it starts off on the first quarter of 2005, so not right when the game came out. So you can see as it's going up, it's not like it exploded in Wrath. People treat it as if there was something fundamentally amazing about Wrath of the Lich King that meant it had its peak values. It went up a bit during Wrath. The massive explosion came during Vanilla. It came over a 2-year period. It carried on climbing and then leveled out, and then it declined in Cataclysm. I mean, you know, there was just so many factors that fed into it and just created this thing. And also, something else I didn't mention, but I also think was a factor in it, because of the success of World of Warcraft, loads of other companies tried to do MMOs based on what they felt was the World of Warcraft system. In other words, we had the attack of the WoW clones, if you'll pardon the pun. And the problem with that is, then it's a bit like, okay, yeah, this is a shitter version of WoW. Why don't I just play WoW? Whereas if more of those MMO companies had done their own thing and not tried to copy WoW, then it may have had more competition as well. So I think the competition shot themselves in the foot by trying to imitate it. It's a bit like, you know, when people try and start YouTube channels and try and become great, and you'll get people who'll say something like, oh yeah, I'm going to try and be a bit like a PewDiePie type channel. And it's like, why would you say that? You're just going to be a shit version of PewDiePie. They'll just watch PewDiePie instead. You know, don't try and be a shitter version of something else, because people will just go and play or do or watch the better version of it. You have to be your own thing. Even though I didn't blame those companies for doing that, because I thought it perfectly sensible in many ways in order to make a profit. But if ever you wanted to compete, you were always going to be playing a chasing game. You were never going to catch them, because every time World of Warcraft brought out a new expansion, it already had the core game. All it had to do was update features and give it polish. Whereas a brand new game has to get all these different things right, and you're not going to get them all right. But anyway. Maybe you have some anti-power complex, but you've recently been most engaged with MMOs where you do not feel like the most powerful being in the universe. Well, I mean, most MMOs are like that, aren't they? You just, and I know a lot of people particularly complained with WoD with regards to this, because we were the expedition leader. We were the Outland Forces leader, effectively. This massive general, second only almost to the king or the war chief or whatever. And a lot of people liked the idea of being the anonymous adventurer who comes in, solves everyone's problems, and then pisses off again. You know. You know, like the littlest hobo type thing. You just scuttle in, solve everyone's problems, bugger off again. Who was that masked man? That sort of situation. And yeah, they don't like it when we're this now we're someone who goes around punching planets in the face or in the ankles. The amount of people playing a game is a perfectly indicator how good a game is overall. Well, how good a game is overall is very subjective. It's certainly a good indicator of how great a game is. Not always how good it is, because there is such a thing as pack mentality. We're all effectively pack creatures. People will do a thing because they feel it's what other people are doing. They will conform. That being said, I don't think you could say that a game that is very popular is a bad game. I mean, you've got to remember, you know, if you're someone who likes playing role-playing games and you have played World of Warcraft for years, you've invested in that character, you might think BFA is like really terrible. But and if you can think of something else to do with your time, you'll do it and you'll stop playing, which a lot of people have. But let's say you can't. Let's say there's other games you think you might quite like, but you also know that you've got 6, 8, 10, 14 years maybe invested in your character in World of Warcraft. Do you really want to just drop that and start afresh with a game you're not even sure you're going to like? I think there's a lot of people hang on just because of that as well. You know. Look, hold on. Missed a comment there. Looks like Wrath managed to maintain its sub-numbers throughout its lifetime as opposed to the other expansions. Kind of makes it the best, I guess. Well, Wrath did have... I mean, I quit during Wrath. It was so awful at the start. I suppose that part of it gives me some hope for BFA, beyond all reason, because my initial impression of Wrath was it was a heap of shit. When it launched, it was a heap of shit. It was an embarrassment. It got better. It got a lot better. I'd already quit by then, though. That's why you love the old zone so much. You as the player do feel like an adventurer just going on you know, out ongoing zone issues. Yeah. Things that become very popular often get flushed down the toilet because they then have to broaden the appeal to the point of watering it down to nothing. X-Files was like that. Couldn't say, didn't really watch X-Files much. Didn't like it. Oh, who's talking about bloody Bieber? Can you not? There's one thing that's worse than talking about gnomes. It's talking about Justin Bieber. Gordon Bennett. Blizz needs to be a lot more like grinding gear games. They made a good game, Path of Exile, that is gaining popularity since its release years ago. Yes. But there was a time when all those great things we said about that company, we would say about Blizzard. You know, and it may be, I mean, the way I look at it as well, there's what some people maybe don't think about. If you imagine the people at the top of the company, they're the people who started the company. So they were games developers. J. Allen Brack, Mike Morheim, games developers. As the company grew, of course, they had to take responsibilities like executive responsibilities. That removed them from the day-to-day game design. The longer you're removed from that, and the more corporate you inevitably become, it's perfectly understandable. Nothing you can do about it. So it's possible a company just naturally changes over time as a result of that. They become more focused on the corporate side of things and less so on the game side of things and the player side of things. Maybe it will get better, who knows. Final Fantasy has engaged me because it feels like an actual RPG and raiding is fun. That's what you want. So I'm not getting one of those things in WoW right now. I mean, fun, I always say fun is subjective. But what I don't think is just my opinion, what I think is a fact, is that the people who make Final Fantasy have a much better regard for their player base than Blizzard do with their World of Warcraft player base. I really don't think there's any doubt in that now. PoE has its problems too. There's no adventure mode, so you're doing the same 10 acts for every 2 in every league. Grindy year games. I don't know, I don't play. While they weren't influenced by Activision, Blizzard was a good company. There was people complained about it before that even. I mean, before Activision, people used to complain about, what was it, Vivendi or something. I mean, that was way back before World of Warcraft time. You know. Although, I think they did. I mean, see, the thing is, let's imagine, hang on, let's put this back up again. Let's just say that these numbers, and they're not, but let's say they were a measure of how good the game was at any one time. So you're saying Wrath is the best, are you? Okay, fine. Actually, technically, you might have to say Cataclysm. But you could argue that's spillover from the end of... Because here's an interesting thing. What do you think about this? So Wrath of the Lich King had its highest right at the end of Wrath of the Lich King, which continued in Cataclysm before it went down. Now, did it spike at the end of Wrath of the Lich King because Wrath of the Lich King at the end was super amazing? Or did it spike because people were anticipating Cataclysm and thought, wow, this is amazing, we've got a dragon. There's a dragon kicking the shit out of the whole world. Who knows? But anyway, let's just say this was a measure. What you could say, right, I need another date now. Hold on, can I look this up? When did Activision acquire them? Let's see. Google, answer me. Here we go. Oh, I don't want the bloody share price. 2008. Oh, no, that's when they announced it was going to merge. When did they merge? No, it was 2008. Okay, so 2008. Jesus, that was ages ago. So, hang on a minute. Is that right? Activision actually copped hold of them before Wrath of the Lich King. Is that right? Hold on, let's have a look here. July the 8th, 2008. So that would be third quarter, I guess, wouldn't it? 2008. That's before Wrath of the Lich King. So, if everyone says that Wrath of the Lich King was so amazing, it was Activision Blizzard at that time. I didn't actually know. I couldn't remember. The beginning of Kata was good until Crybaby's got the dungeon nurse wanted. You see, I wasn't playing at the time, but I did hear that. When I came back to the game, people did talk about the fact that the dungeons at the start of Cataclysm were rock hard, and they got a load of shit. Now, see, the thing is, to be fair to Blizzard, if it was, and I wasn't there at the time, I don't know what sort of backlash it was, but good evening, Lamnakin. But if they got a lot of shit, I don't think we can blame them for changing it. What I would notice, though, is that when I did come back to the game, not only were the dungeons that came halfway through Cataclysm, they weren't that hard, were they, if we're honest? They weren't terrible. They weren't that hard, though. But then Mr. Pandaria, the dungeons were worthless. Even the heroic dungeons, remember there was no... I mean, I suppose there's challenge mode. But there were no mythic dungeons then. All heroic dungeons were in Mr. Pandaria were level cap normal dungeons. There was no step up in them. You remember Total Biscuit leaving WoW and Kata? That was a while ago. It was a while ago. I came back to the game in Cataclysm at the end of it for Dragon Soul. They weren't hard. They just needed you to use your class's abilities like CC and such. Not CC. Oh, don't say you had to coordinate. Silly Blizzard. But yeah, I mean, I can't say. You know, I could appreciate when I did come to the game that the dungeons had potential to be challenging, but I don't think they really were when I came into it. Again, it was the genie out of the bottle problem. They tried to make dungeons actually have tactics after Lich King. Mindless AA spam. Yes, yeah, I think, yeah, same as flying. Once you... I mean, it's like Blizzard themselves say, you know, they talked in Legion at several times, as well as BFA things, that when they want to set the bar somewhere, they'd rather set it too high and bring it down than the other way around. Because it's like, imagine an ability that you're, or a class, say, or something, whatever. You know, if you bring it out and you make it a little bit too hard and then you make it a bit easier, then that's okay. It's like a buff. Whereas if you do it the other way around, if something's too easy and you make it harder, it's like a nerf. People don't like that. And yeah, I think that's right. I think that's the same situation there probably then. You have to be very careful to get the level right. You can't go too low. And they're aware of that. They know that. But I mean, some of the dungeons in Wrath of the Lich King, the ones that came later on, like Pit of Sauron was a tricky one, wasn't it? What was the other one? I mean, Halls of Reflection, once you knew what you were doing, wasn't really. It was hide. You just hid in a corner, didn't you, for most of it? What was the other one? There was another one. Was there another one? The ICC dungeons, were there 3? I know there were 3, but I can only think of 2. Oh yeah, I remember the other one. That was the one that only had like 2 bosses in it, wasn't it? I seem to remember that was quite hard. Can't remember. Yeah, Wrath of the Lich King, that's what I'm thinking of. I was just trying to think, because there were some Forge of Souls, that's the one I was thinking of, there were some tricky dungeons appeared later on in Wrath of the Lich King, is what I was trying to get at. But anyway. We will get hard dungeons when Classic comes out. Yeah, but people just moan about that then. Amazing how individual human can be so clever, but you have a mass of people. It's the most stupid and easiest thing to manipulate. Well, if you're talking about from Blizzard's point of view, the issue with them is that it doesn't matter how good your criticism is. If they've got 1 million people telling them how great they are, then that stokes their ego. And then they think that people criticise them are just trolls and ingrates and don't understand. Because that's a classic you get from games developers. Oh, you don't understand games development. No, maybe not, but I understand games because I play games. And I understand it when I don't find it fun. You know, but oh no, you don't understand what you're talking about. You know. I mean, it's a bit like, you know, do you know what it's like? It's like on Kitchen Nightmares when you get some chef who turns out some pile of shit and they don't understand why there's no customers or understand it. And if you try and say it's shit, I mean, some of those chefs even tell Gordon Ramsay he doesn't know what he's talking about. But, you know, they'll certainly tell customers they don't know what they're talking about. It's that level. It's like, don't be stupid. A customer understands when they're happy with their product, and when they're not happy with it, don't matter whether they understand the process of making it or not. They're not happy with it. Make it better. Halls of Reflection was a pain in the arse. I thought it was quite fun, apart from the first bit where you just basically, like I said, hid in a corner. Hide in a corner to make it come to you, and then sneak out and mug it, and then back into the corner again. It could sometimes be a bit of a pain healing because of line of sight sometimes. I seem to remember, but anyway. Was it halls? Yes, it was halls where you line of sight the ads. At the first bit, for the first bosses. WoW players nowadays are just crying, in your opinion. I think you'll find. Without wanting to play the millennial card, that's just gamers in general. What people expect of games is very different. That being said, they're still customers and they have every right to say, I'm not satisfied with this product. At what point, though, do the developers as artists feel like the community is telling them how to make the game? It can conflict with creativity. I don't think it conflicts with creativity. I think it conflicts with their ego. It's the same thing when games developers say, yes, tell us what you don't like, but don't tell us what you would do to fix it. That is them, because what they don't want to do is be seen to go, oh, what a great idea. Yeah, we'll do that. They don't like doing that because then it hurts their ego. It's almost like, well, I should have thought of that. It doesn't have to be like that. You know, you should ask for feedback. But no, it doesn't because they still make the decisions. No one's suggesting they should throw it out to a vote. God forbid. Jesus Christ, we know what voting does. It puts Donald Trump in the White House and kicks the UK out of the European Union. Don't let people vote on anything ever. Ever. Jesus Christ. But listen to what they're saying and act on it. And if someone happens to come up with a good idea, there's nothing wrong with implementing it. If you also think it's a good idea. So, anyway. But they don't. They just have this ego, this arrogance. You know. Because the problem is, if we just said what we thought was wrong with it, you know, we don't like this, and do what they say, and just say we don't like this, don't like that. You can imagine what they're like back in the studio, going, bloody hell, they're never happy. They don't like this, they don't like that. What's up with them? And they'll never know because they don't want us to tell them. Speak to WoW, not politics. Sure. What people want is not always what people need. Anyway, WoW is politics. Everything's politics. Putting my socks on this morning was politics. What people want is not always what people need. Yeah, but people don't need a game. It's a luxury product. I understand it when it comes to, say, healthcare treatment. Like, take me, for example, with the surgery I've just had. I was given a choice of 3 treatments. Did I exercise my choice? Did I? Hell. I said to the doctor, what should I have? And he told me, right, we'll do that. You know, so something like that, yeah, you shouldn't have choice. But a game is a luxury product. It's your leisure time. So, yeah, you should. You should absolutely have your full say in that. And because they don't need it at all. So it's entirely about what they want. And don't try and turn this into a you think you want it but you don't, because I mean that is something that has bitten Azercostas on the arse many times since. He certainly hasn't said that again, has he? Anyway, technology to scale content to level exists, and they should take advantage of this. We could run raised dungeons with a wide level range of characters together and get appropriate rewards for each. The technology would exist to do that. Would we really want it, though? Because you can't just scale people up. You can scale them down. You can't easily scale them up. Because then they'd suddenly have to acquire loads of new abilities. They don't know what to do with them. Do you really want that? Someone who's like level 10, or I think I'll do all dear. Even albeit only on LFR. Do you really want that? No, we don't. I mean, you know what it's like in time walking. When you do time walking dungeons, if you're in a group, let's say, I don't know, let's say Cataclysm dungeons, and you're in there. Oh, I can't remember what bloody level Cataclysm is. Is it level 8? No, level 85, isn't it? So you've got some actual level 85s in there, 86, 87, something like that. They do way less damage and the dungeon takes longer. Now, all right, it's time walking. It's still going to be done. You're all right. It's not a big problem. But then imagine some content where it's not guaranteed, like LFR, because the scaling isn't perfect. Because they haven't got your Azerite gear or anything, or all the new shiny things for that expansion. The problem with elitism as an alternative democracy is every idiot wants to rule the world. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not seriously suggesting there should be no democracy in society. Like Churchill said, democracy is the very worst form of government imaginable, apart from all the others we've tried. But obviously, in a company, you don't need a democracy. So the developers should be absolutely free to decide what the best way to proceed is. It's just that they should take advice. They should listen to views, and then they can come up with what they believe is the best thing. And then, you know, ultimately it's their responsibility whether they produce a good game or not anyway. But they've got a much better chance of doing that if they've listened to all the views, surely. It's the same as making any decision. The more views you listen to, the more likely you are to make a good decision. If I had to play in Legacy mode, which patch in WoW's history would I choose to play in? Ooh. At some point in MOP. I don't really care when, actually. Miss and Pandaria, I was quite happy with Not just the game, the expansion, but also the way classes worked. I played the greatest range of classes on a more frequent basis. Like, even though in WoD I had technically a greater range of classes, because there's not much else to do but level, or more alts, I didn't play any one for very long. I didn't really enjoy most of them. But in MoP, even Warlocks, I played a Warlock in MoP every now and then. I don't really like playing Warlocks most of the time. How is LFR not guaranteed? Because people wipe on it multiple times. And then eventually you decide it's not happening, so you leave. Not guaranteed. Should try it sometime. You'd rather everything scale to max level. But in fact, you should particularly try LFR when the last wing first comes out. That's always a great laugh. You'd rather everything scale to max level, but you need to level to unlock content. So you begin... Yeah, see, I would rather... And it doesn't work with the way WoW does its storytelling, but I would rather it was just there, just open. Go where you like, knock yourself out. That would be way better. But that doesn't work with the way WoW does it, because it relies upon you to access the end game for a particular expansion to have done the zones tied to that expansion. Which is disappointing for me, but not everyone agrees. But anyway. Do you have any idea why your in-game calendar is showing that time walking begins on Thursday instead of tomorrow? Oh, is it? I don't know without looking myself. But no, I wouldn't know why that would be. You think TBC was the highest point? All the classes... No! God, no! Retribution Paladin was a shambles. And they kept pissing about with it all the way through TBC. First thing they did when TBC launched was they nerfed Crusader Strike, making it all but useless. And then they kept pissing about. For what? Because of perceived overpoweredness in PvP. Had nothing to do with PvE. And it was a really useful ability for maintaining other paladins' judgments. But as soon as you made it a 10-second cooldown, you couldn't guarantee that anymore. You know, and then there was... and they kept monkeying about with it all the way through. And then they tried to test out some of the things for Wrath. And also the other thing with Rets in TBC was you needed everything. You needed attack power and you needed spell power. You needed strength and agility and intellect. You know, absolute shambles. Mad. It was terrible. I always say if you manage to get through TBC as a Ret, then, you know, you could be pretty committed. You could consider yourself committed, as I do. That's the acid test, actually making it through TBC as a Ret. What do I think about a lot of WoW YouTubers or streamers changing to other games? I mean, people will change to games, ultimately. People shouldn't feel... I mean, it's quite... You know... If you're someone, okay, let's use an example I've used in the past for this. So take Az, for example, Heels vs Babyface. Obviously, he's doing quite well again now. But think about what happened with him. He didn't want to play WoW anymore. This is going back a couple of years now. He didn't want to play WoW anymore, got sick of it. But it's how he was making his income. So he struggled through it, but he clearly hated it. Then he decided, no, do you know what? I can do a channel without doing WoW. Tried that, failed miserably. Then they announced the WoW Classic, even though that wasn't coming out, so he came back to it. And all of a sudden, yeah, it's showing on Thursday for me, actually. Time Walking Dungeon event, Cataclysm. Players level 86 or higher may access a special Time Walking Dungeon. But on Thursday, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why that is, sorry. So yeah, and then, you know, he because I can't imagine how he was living on for that year. But anyway, so then came back. But that meant he had to do WoW content again. And although when he came back to it, he was initially okay with it, you can tell that he still didn't really like it, and it was wearing thin. But he was also trapped because it's where he makes his money. And he doesn't make so much money that he can afford much of a drop in revenue from it. And it's his only source material. Whereas you'll notice more recently, like you've just said there, with his reaction videos, because I think that's what he desperately wants to do. I think he desperately wants to become a general gaming channel. And obviously he's been able to do that of late, but then the way he's done that is by producing, shall we say, very critical videos. Now, I'm not necessarily going to blame people for doing critical videos because, well, I've done enough. But they seem to be exclusively that, with the exception of the few videos he did with his mum playing WoW. Now it's a news channel. Well, that's what he's trying to be. It hasn't been going long enough with this new sort of format. Obviously, you need to see if over time. But at the moment, you know, if he were to continue doing what he's doing now with the same level of success, then yes, I think he will have achieved his aim, that he will be able to do what he's doing without WoW. And he'd be much happier as a result. But that's an issue that some of these YouTubers and streamers can have, of course. If they focus on one game, I do, if you suddenly don't want to play that game anymore, you're almost sort of in a bit of a situation, I'm going to lose all this revenue if I stop. Because it's not as easy. Like, many YouTubers may feel it's their personality, and actually if they played another game, those same people would carry on following them. No, they won't. And he proved that. They won't. Some people have been able to make the transition, but the way they've done it, like Lazy Peon, the way they've done it is by adding in more stuff and over time moving that way, rather than trying to do it in one go. He does have a nice amount of views on his videos now. I haven't watched them because they're not my sort of thing. But I have noticed, because they still come up on my feed. I'm still subscribed to him. So I do notice. And yes, he will now be earning a reasonable amount. Whether it's enough to put enough aside, because my worry with full-time YouTubers is always, are they thinking about the future? I mean, I'm the one to talk. I don't really think about the future too much. But at least I have a pension. So I do worry about that. Because if they, for whatever reason, had to stop, either because YouTubers just fall from grace, or, you know, they just became too ill to do it, or for whatever other reason. You were thinking the same thing. He's been blessed by the entire AAA gaming industry collapsing all around him. But this is the thing. Because he's not going to be able to just do those sort of videos forever, but if he finds that as he puts more positive videos in as well, I'm not saying he has to make videos positive or negative. They're like I do. They should just basically be your honest opinion. But I do worry about ones who rely upon it. If he feels that what gets him his views are him being very negative, then, you know, then that can be that could be a worried thing to get into. How many WoW YouTubers are British? Are they? I suppose they're quite a lot are, aren't they? I don't know. No idea. You like Taliesin and Evertal, but there's some aspects you don't like. Overly produced. Yeah, but that's their thing, isn't it? They produce. That's their thing. Entertainment. That's their niche. I think they're very clever the way they do things. The fans seem a bit bunny happy. Well, that's fine, though. They're catering to their audience. I wish Blizzard would do that a bit more. Everyone would be delighted. Any criticism is not well received well over there. Do they not? Really? Okay. I don't know. Something about the British accent. I don't know that. One of the good US ones was on here. He commented, wow, Krender is always relaxing. Americans think Brits sound more intelligent with the accent, even if they're right gits. You can be intelligent and a git at the same time, you know. It is possible. They're the worst. They're what I used to call, you know, as a teacher in a school, I used to try and divide. I was never very good at it, I have to say. But you try and divide the sorts of kids. It's the only way to try and manage the behaviour, and I was very, very bad at that. But you've got your destructive but thick kids. They just don't know any better, you know. And then you've got your intelligent, aspirational kids. They're fantastic, and in various ones. The worst kids are what I used to call calculating evil. The ones who are super destructive, who have no thought for their own future, no aspirations, but they're clever and cunning. They're the worst. Intelligent gits are the worst. We Brits aren't arrogant. We just know everything. It's always sensible to be aware of one's own level. Yes. I don't think we do know. I don't think we know very much at all. Again, my experience of a teacher is that most people leave school knowing very little, remembering very little of what they learnt at school, in fact. You don't actually know what a git means. It's a relatively low key, it's not super offensive, but it basically refers to someone who's a little bit malicious, you know. It's a relatively minor insult. It's usually more often used like as a bit of banter, but yeah, it refers to someone who's a little bit malicious. I brighten up your Tuesdays. Oh, thank you very much. That's good. But yes. Well, hopefully there shall be a good number of others. Malicious is too strong a word, like a cheek. Well, no, it does tend to follow malice, though. It tends to be someone who's done something that's pissed someone off. But yeah, we're not talking about like evil levels of malice. You know, it's a minorish one. But yes, sometimes it's easy to forget, actually. See, in Britain, we can be very aware of common American slang because we watch so much American telly. Whereas a lot of Americans don't understand fairly common terms in Britain. But then, to be fair, there's people in parts of Britain don't. Like, I keep using phrases, not all the time, but every now and then I'll use a phrase where I work, which is only 30 miles away from where I grew up, and people won't know what I'm talking about. It'll be like the first time they've heard that word. You know, there's a lot of very regional words as well. Have I seen Ivan Kuzkin's? The Wrathgate remastered. I haven't watched it, but I have seen it on my feed, but I haven't watched it yet. No. But I probably will. Do I remember the old gits from Harry Enfield? Yes, I do. They were pretty mean. Yes. They were more of the evil level of malice. But yeah. Example in my regional words, like Dougie, for example, meaning someone who's a bit thick. That was a relatively recent one that came up. You know, I can't always remember because sometimes I'll think of a word that I think is more widespread than it actually is, but you know, whereas it's not. Like Ginnel, I don't think Ginnell's used much outside of where I grew up, like Yorkshire. But there's quite a lot. But some of them will be sort of wider. But yeah, as I say, you can even just change to a different county and there'll be some things that are a bit different. Like the weirdest thing is with fish and chip shops. Apparently down south, they often don't serve them with mushy peas or curry sauce. So I'm told. Someone might be lying to me. You didn't really care for the remastered version. Well, I shall watch it and judge for myself later. It is on my feed, I noticed earlier today. In fact, I need to get it up, actually. Let's see if it's still there. But I will probably have a little look. It's only a few minutes anyway, surely. It'll not take that long. You were shocked by chips and gravy. You need something a bit moist on them, don't you? You can't just have chips dry. They're not fries. Do I get the orange chip? Where I am, it's all shit anyway. Scunthorpe is the worst place for takeaway. It's appalling. But fortunately, And now, thanks to my surgery, it's pointless me ever trying to get takeaway again. I'll be making everything myself. So if I want chips, I'll only be able to have a small portion and I'll have to make them myself. And my chips are actually really nice. In fact, salt and vinegar is obviously quite common, but you don't soak them in vinegar. The vinegar's just there. The vinegar's really there for the fish, not the chips anyway. But you don't douse them in vinegar. God almighty. No, you mushy peas or curry sauce. That's what you want. Anyway. But yeah, so apparently this is true then, is it? Is that what people are saying? I've not actually been lied to. It's actually a thing. Chips, and no. They might, in certain instances, appear similar. Here's the difference, right? Fries, you basically cut those potatoes really thin and fry them. That's what a fry is. That's not what a chip is. If anyone cooks chips that way, they're doing it wrong. Here's what you do with a chip. So first of all, you cut them into fairly thick sections of potato. All right. In fact, I saw a Michelin-starred chef doing them. He used a potato corer, sorry, an apple corer. I use that now because they're brilliant. But anyway, so you get those, right? Then what you have to do is you have to boil or steam them until they're tender. A knife will go easily through them, but they're not going to mush. It's not mashed potato we're making. Then what you have to do is air dry them. So you put them on a rack, drain all the water off them, put them on a rack, put them in the fridge. Okay, nice circulation of cold air. Then what you do is you fry them on low temperature until they're just sort of starting to turn brownish. All right, then you take them out, drain them again, back on the rack, back in the fridge, cool them down. Then you take them out again, and then you fry them for the final time on high temperature. Right, that's a chip. If you've made it in any other way, it's not a chip. Your chippies have deep fried Mars bars. The one in Scotland's do, yeah. Jesus. Do I think it was a right move by Blizzard to move away from the fixed item level drop to those new mechanics of artifact power, Azerite traits, and random upgrades? Yes and no, except I've already talked today. I don't think the Azerite trait system is a good one. I think there's too many problems with it that aren't easily fixable. And it was never seriously going to be ready for the start of the expansion. And even if they make it just about okay at the end of the expansion, what's the bloody point unless they carry it on to the next expansion? To know. But in general, yeah, having more interesting gearing systems is, yeah, that's fine. But not Azerite traits. Why did I have surgery? Because I'm too fat. I've done a special channel on it as well, for anyone who actually wants to follow all that and not be bored by it in here. Yes. So I had weight loss surgery, basically. And I had it 10 days ago. You only treat yourself rarely. You do the low-carb diet, not because of health, because you like to burn fat as fatty food tastes nice and you want lots of it. Well, there you go. Okay. You don't put that much effort. Here's the thing. See, I enjoy, and I've always enjoyed cooking. But if truth be told, you know, sometimes I'll have cooked something really nice and sometimes I'll just slap something in the oven. Now that I'm only going to be able to have small meals, it's going to be much more in my interest to take more time over it. So I will be making, you know, everything as nice as I can. At the end of the day, if I'm only going to be allowed a small amount of it, I might as well make sure it's bloody nice. So I will be putting lots of effort into all my meals. You chop them up and throw them in the oven. If you don't even put fat on them, that's not even roast potato. I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what that is. That's how you do it. But after the first boil, you toss them in a bowl with salt. Not salt. You can toss them with some herbs. Some finely chopped herbs. That's okay. Or some spice. Sometimes what I do when I'm doing the boiling part of it, I'll put some spices in there, like cumin or something like that, if I want a bit spicy. With some paprika and some cayenne pepper, that sort of stuff. Although sometimes it's just as... Actually, sometimes if you sprinkle a bit of paprika on them just before they go in for the final fry, then that helps the colour a bit. I'll tell you a thing I've sent off for, actually, but it's going to take ages to get here. But I'm not ready for it yet anyway. It's an air fryer. I'm getting rid of the old deep fat fryer because that's not going to be any good for me. I'm getting an air fryer. So I'm going to be excited to try a few things in there. But anyway, gastric bypass, no. I was going to go in for a gastric bypass, but apparently I have unusually rigid abdominal walls, so they couldn't do that. So I've got a sleeve instead. Speaking of Scotland, you had some Arbor Earth Smokies for the first time. What is that, like kippers or something? I'm not familiar with that. Dare you bring the topic back to WoW? Yes, please. We're nearly out of time. Well, we are out of time, but we'll still for a little bit. You wonder if the PTR for 8.1.5 will be up soon. Well, think about it from the developer's point of view. It's Christmas. I'm pretty sure soon after Christmas they'll start talking about it, and I would guess it'll be up by the end of the month. Do I still play BFA much? What's my best Titan Forge? No. I still play it now and then. See, here's the thing. What I really only want to do at the moment is Mythic Plus Dungeons, but the group I have doesn't always play each week, so I don't get to do it all the time. So I'm not playing it that much. I am playing it every week, but sometimes just once a week for like a few hours. That's it. So I'm not playing it that much. I don't really have much in the way of Titan Forge, and I don't have a good Titan Forge piece at all. So, oh, it's herring, is it? Right, okay. This is like a channel for recovering casual WoW players. A channel for everyone. It's just that I am no longer a serious player. But, you know, I still am interested enough in the game, because the reason I didn't quit playing seriously is not because I didn't think it was worth it. It's just I don't have the time. That's all there is to it. If I'd have had the time still, I would still be a Mythic Raider, and I'd still be doing all the usual stuff that I had been doing. It's not dissatisfaction with raiding. Raiding is one of the few parts of the game that I struggle to... I occasionally do criticise some things. Nothing's perfect. But, you know, I'm generally very positive about. I mean, I say I did some Heroic Uldir the other day. I thoroughly enjoyed myself in there. I didn't enjoy messing up on Gahoon, I have to say, but, you know, still. You got your neck to level 40. I think my neck's 28. Really is time to connect more servers. So hard to find a Horde guild on Sourfang. There is nothing to stop them, technologically speaking, from not having realms at all. There's no need for realms. But yes. But actually, going back to Will, though, you say about my best Titan Forge. I don't even know at the moment what the best Titan Forge even can be. I'm not even sure what the cap is. That's how out of place I am with, like, power gear in the game. You've seen Method players sub 40. Yeah, but, you know, they only need to get it up to a point for a certain point for when the new raid comes out, don't they? No realms would somewhat eliminate the cross-realm debate. It would eliminate all sorts of things. It would eliminate their transfer fees as well, which is why I suspect they don't do it. You're not a raider, you just like farming AP. I hope you do it in a group. I can't imagine doing it all like islands and stuff solo. I mean, I don't even do the emissary caches now. I don't even log on every 3 days just to do those. That's how bad I am now. Which is disappointing. And it's not that I think that world quests are terrible. It's not that it takes you that long. It's just, I just think to myself, what's the point? Because my gear is plenty good enough to do the world quest. And if that's the only content I'm going to do in a particular week, I don't really need, you know, it's like, what am I doing it for? That's the difficulty. I mean, I'll do the storylines. I'll do the war. I mean, I haven't actually done the latest war campaign. I did it on the PTR. I haven't done it for real yet. But that's fine. I'll just save that up. I don't have to rush through it. You guess we're all waiting on Vulpera to be a playable race. It will never be a playable race. Ever. So fast to level and gear up, one wonders how much money they now make from realm transfers. I like to think not as much as they would have done at one time, because it's the only way they might agree to merge servers. But I couldn't say, I'm afraid. You just do world quests and weekly stuff, only takes a couple of hours a day. Yeah, it doesn't take that long. I agree. But, you know, it's, I mean, to play a game because it's interesting. World quests are not that interesting. You did them for Rep and Legendaries and Legion. No need nowadays. Well, I'm recovering. Don't just say no to World quests. I do say no to World quests. I haven't done any for ages. I'm not even exalted with any faction in BFA. That's how bad I am. You'd like those Naga with legs as a playable alliance race. I think they should just forget about new races for now and just concentrate on getting the game right. And I know new races is more of an arts team thing than a development team. But, I mean, maybe they could, going back to what people said earlier, could work on, you know, eliminating more examples of clipping on cloaks and stuff, maybe. World quests aren't fun enough to do just for the sake of it. The only one that is the shell game. I love the shell game. It's a bit like some of the old Kirin Tor ones in Legion I used to like. Not that jumping off the thing with the Super Mario business, obviously. But the other ones I quite liked. The Enigma one I used to like. Do I think we are overfed with gear to the point where gear has no real value? Yes, absolutely. Totally overfed with gear. Gorged on it. You know. And exactly that's it. And do you know what? It is a perfect metaphor for obesity, isn't it, in terms of attitude to food. We get so much gear all the time. You know, try telling someone who's own, you know, from 14 years ago was playing vanilla. Try telling them that in the future with World of Warcraft, every day you can get multiple epics and you will be disappointed with them and immediately trash them. You try telling someone from vanilla days that that's what WoW is going to become. It's unbelievable. You know, we just get this glut of gear and most of it is worthless. Epic gear that is worthless. You know, it might even be as low as 5% of the epic gear we get. It may be lower than that even. Maybe that's too high. I mean, that's like 1 in 20. The epic gear we get that's actually an upgrade. I mean, sometimes it's exciting when you even get a side grade. You know, oh, well, this won't be much good for raids, but it might be all right for Mythic Plus. Yeah, I'll keep it. You know, even that's sort of exciting. While they're at it, adding real cloaks with hoods. And yes, cloaks with hoods. I want a cloak with a hood and I want an eye patch. I can get an eye patch, actually, but not if I wear a hat. I want to wear an eye patch and a hat. Make it so. What really puts you off with the Match 2 Mini Tortolan World Cup, the shell game it's called, is the hideously blurry texture on the parchment. It's fine. It's all right. It's a memory game. It's great. BFA gear is like the poorly prepared chips all the metaphors are linking up. Oh, it's even worse than that, though. You just finished playing Joust in Mount Hyjal. Oh, yeah, I remember that. I didn't like that much. But it was at least a fun little activity. Sort of, if you like that sort of thing. The cloaks in Lord of the Rings Online put WoW to... The whole... Well, it's not the quality of them so much. It's just the attitude to cosmetic in Lord of the Rings Online is way better. You know, they have the attitude that you should be able to dress as you like. You know, your outward appearance should be as you like. Whereas WoW, they don't. And it's baffling as to why. Why aren't the Alliance using the Vindicar to blow hordes out the Azeroth? Who knows? Who knows? We've got spaceships with plasma cannons. We've got a mage who can fly around a bloody ship. Why the hell are we fighting Jaina in the next raid? Why doesn't she fly around her magic ship and blow that pyramid off its steps? Who knows? Who knows the answer to these things? They don't think things through. You've stopped doing BFA daily emissaries and instead doing Legion emissaries. Is it that bad? Just to get the mounts? Yeah. Well, hold on a minute. Isn't that in BFA now? you know, getting your bar to exalted and getting a little thing, isn't that actually in the game now? I can't be certain because I haven't got any factions to exalted, so I'm not going to do it myself. But yeah, it obviously, I mean, in many ways, for an MMO, for people to go back and find something useful to do in old content is a good thing. But when the reason you're doing it is because the current stuff is boring, then obviously that's not such a good thing. I am a slacker, but again, now that I'm a casual player, I start to see a few things. Why should I be otherwise? You know, I mean, all right, I've not done the full Gahoon storyline yet, but it'll keep. You know, I'll do it eventually. It's not like when the next patch comes out, I'm going to have a glut of content to do, because I would have done if I were a raider, but I'm not. I don't have. There's not that much of the game that's actually useful to me. If what I care about is the storyline and doing some Mythic Plus dungeons. BFA extra rep farm doesn't give mounts, mostly toys. Oh, is it? Okay. No mounts, bad. Paragon caches are in game and give 5k gold plus 2.5k AP and some war resources. Yeah. You know that you'll now hit my sensitive point, but you honestly believe that if class design was good, people would forgive some hiccups. Well, they would, but I mean, that's because class design is, I mean, yeah, it's the hardest thing to get right, but it's the most important thing to get right because everyone plays a class. It's how you access the game. Not everyone raids, not everyone does dungeons, not everyone does battlegrounds, not everyone does arenas, not everyone does world quests, you know, not everyone even gets a level cap, but everyone plays a class. And assuming you at least get to level 10, everyone picks a spec. So absolutely, class design should be treated much more seriously than it is. They do seem to give a few thousand gold based on what you and some guilders have seen. Well, I mean, I did think this Christmas maybe I would put some effort in and do some world quests and get something up to... I'm not that far off getting Champions of Azeroth to Exalted, I suppose. I mean, that would put my neck up a bit, wouldn't it? You were interested in the storyline, but it only takes about half an hour to do. Then you have to wait for the next patch. Well, exactly. That's exactly it. That's why I'm not rushing it. I mean, I did it on the PTR as well anyway. So, I don't really... It's not like I'm missing anything. There's nothing I don't know. I've experienced it already in testing. So there's no massive rush for me to do it. I mean, I will do it. We should probably get rid of that. No, people logging on now. Well, people logging on now will be getting ready for me to say we're finished. But, you know. You kind of wish Mythic Plus had a non-timed scaling only, no affix version as a casual or normal heroic quality mode. Not, well, wouldn't that just be a heroic dungeon? You know, if it was non-timed, no affix, and didn't offer the top end rewards, isn't that just a heroic dungeon? Or do you mean it still need to scale up in difficulty? Just give us the bloody beam out. Do you know what? I would love the beam out, and I'll bet you when it's released, I don't end up getting it because it's one of those mounts where you have to do so much stupid for it that I won't do. I'd love the beam out. I love that whole area in Stormsong Valley. The whole bees thing, the honey monsters. It's fantastic. It's my favourite place in BFA. There isn't any neck item level for getting exalted. Oh, well, sod it then. Thought there was. Heroics are too easy. Needs to be hard enough to at least require some coordination, I see. Of course, largely it is the affixes that do that. It's not super hard even on Mythic Plus if you had no affixes. So getting exalted with Magni doesn't even matter then, I see. Alright then. Do I not get anything? I don't really care about the hat anymore. That's old. In your guild, you didn't even do a single normal. We just got straight into heroic when we got to 120. Yeah, of course. You use crafted gear, don't you? Just get some crafted gear. Or some, if you've got a load of gold, get, a bit of BOE gear. So easy to get yourself past normal. In fact, quite a lot of people, when they hit level cap in raiding guilds, will just go straight into mythic dungeons. As soon as they became available. Because it didn't need to be that high item level for them. Like mythic plus naught. If you're, good players that are coordinated. Blizzard fanboys are usually only fanboys because they miss the glory days of WoW and want it back. Maybe. I mean, there's some people who will just genuinely like it. I mean, it's not like it's a terrible game. There is much in World of Warcraft that could appeal to an awful lot of players. My main criticism is that it's not as good as it should be. Not that it's not as good as it could be. Nothing's as good as it could be. With the possible exception of cheesecake. But that's something else I won't be able to have anything of in the future. But it's not as good as it should be. And that's what's really disappointing. And if they'd have just... I would forgive it more if they'd have just tried to be too ambitious and bit off more than they could chew. But when they, again, ignored the clear and detailed feedback that they were getting throughout the alpha and beta process, and then decide they're going to agree with us 9 months later, that's when they don't get to hide behind anything. Because they actually ignored that feedback. The good thing is the Warfront vendor rewards are awarded for both factions. You get the mirrored mounts and cosmetics. The Warfront rewards actually do look quite nice. Again, I'm not hugely bothered myself. But they do look nice. Or some of the stuff looks nice anyway. You like the plain red and blue cloak? I don't think I can recall that one. By the time you hit Exalted, 355 gear is a downgrade. Well, that's always been my issue with reputation rewards. The Exalted reward, I don't actually understand why they bother giving out. Like even the Revered reward in BFA for factions in general, I was like, what's the point? Because although some people were telling me when they got Revered, it was an upgrade for them. The vast majority of players, it wouldn't be because they'd have done Mythic Dungeons by then. Your main criticism, we're going to give it 5 more minutes, so we're on a timer now. Your main criticism is the game seems to be trying desperately to not be an MMORPG. If you mean in terms of the fact that they need as much stuff as possible to be playable by someone who will play the game without friends and refuses to join a guild, then yes, I think they are doing that, and I think lots of MMOs are doing that. The Krolusk mount is nice. See, I'm not so keen on that one. Oh, you always like Trilobites as a kid. Oh, there you go. They really didn't put a lot of thought into the pacing of the rep rewards in 8.0. I don't think they do in general. I think it's just a common thing. It's very common that the Revered and Exalted rewards, unless they're patterns for a profession, if they're gear rewards, they're very rarely useful to the people that have got that rep. Cheesecake is just a pie with legendary. It's not a pie at all. What sort of cheesecakes do you have? It's not even close to being a pie. There's no pastry in it. In your opinion, top-end faction imbalance harms the game in many ways. From the most casual war mode, I assume is what you mean by that, till the core of Mythic raiding was forced to switch from Ret to Holy on 6 out of 8 Mythic because no Alliance Holy Paladin. Faction imbalance does hurt the game, and when it comes to PvP, I mean, obviously Ian Hazakostas has admitted that it's hurting the game even for that, and that's difficult, that's tricky. But when faction imbalance hurts PvE, that's just inexcusable because it doesn't need to. Forget cheesecake, just eat a pot of ricotta. I may make some. I am planning on doing something with ricotta very on. The thing is though, I'm making this great big long list of recipes that would be suitable. and there's a lot of them. I've already got several months worth, and I still keep, every day I keep coming up with a few others I'd like to do. This is the problem when you enjoy cooking. You just think of stuff you used to make and then think, right, now let's make it like bariatric friendly. So, in other words, low sugar, low fat. So yeah, I can't wait till I can actually eat food. It's worse than just PvP. It's trying to balance duels and 3v3 and world PvP. Yeah, it is difficult when you've got to try and balance, especially classes, around completely different types of content. Because there is a very different balance required for, say, even 2v2, even worse, and, say, full-scale battlegrounds and raids and dungeons. But, you know, that's the stall they set themselves. Talking about balance, Blizzard needs to stop making 90% of the bosses melee hating. Yes, they do. Or, well, they need to do one of two things. Either they need to stop those bosses being melee hating, or they need to give melee the tools to deal. Because it's not like every tier, the encounter design team comes up with whole new ways to screw melee over. It's the same ways that have been used ever since vanilla. So either give us the tools to deal with it, or get rid of those mechanics. Absolutely. The problem is when they do a knee-jerk reaction. This is going to have to be the last point, I'm afraid. The knee-jerk reaction. The classic case was with Mithrax. The orbs that spawn on you. That basically meant that you had to restrict the number of melee in your raid. Right? Blizzard eventually said, right, we need to stop that happening on melee. Okay? So then what happens? So it all goes on range. But did they reduce the number of orbs that spawn? No, they didn't. So what they did is they stopped melee having a shitty time of it, and they dumped it on the ranged instead. And that is just transferring the problem from one player to another. It's just, and that's what they do when they come up with, that's what they do when they make changes midstream. They do a knee-jerk reaction. They realise something's wrong. They need a solution quickly. Instead of having months to think about it, which is what they do during testing, they do it quickly because they didn't think it'd be an issue because they're thick as hell, or they appear to be. And then you get a bad solution. But anyway, last little thing then. Considering how easy melee have everything else, you behave yourself. You want, oh my God. You will not understand, unless you've been melee, just how much at the mercy you are of a tank when you are a melee DPS. You have a tank that doesn't move in a consistent way, right? Each time you lose loads of damage. Easy being melee, my ass. The excuse is probably melee can move and don't need to cast. Not enough of an excuse there. We can't move. When we move, we're not hitting the boss anymore. Anyway, I am going to have to call it there. Thank you very much for coming on for the first Azeroth review of 2019. I hope you all have a good time. We'll be back on again, obviously, next Tuesday. I've got a few other videos planned for this week as well. So, yes, don't forget to subscribe, please, if you haven't already. And have a good night. I'll see you all later.